Good evening, everyone. This is Amanda Manier. I am a veteran advocate and attorney with the Veterans Law Group. This is the Veterans Voice you're tuning into on 790 AM KABC in Los Angeles. This show is all about highlighting and celebrating veterans and their families, organizations that are helping veterans, and answering questions about how veterans can get support in dealing with the VA. Tonight is going to be a little bit different. Tonight we're going to focus on what's going on currently in Afghanistan and the effects that it's having on those people who have served there and also their families. We are live this evening, and if you would like to call in, we are happy to take questions, comments, kind of what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. You can contact us at 1-800-222-KABC, and that's 1-800-222-5222. Feel free to call in, and we would love to discuss all that's going on in the world, specifically in Afghanistan. This evening, I am happy to welcome Jeremiah. He was with us a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking a little bit about just his experience of being in the military, his process of getting VA disability benefits, which is what we do at VA at the Veterans Law Group, and then also about him being a VA loan specialist. But when all of this stuff started breaking with what was happening in Afghanistan, and I thought about who I knew in my life that had spent a significant amount of his time over there, I would love to give his feedback. I picked up the phone and called him and then asked him to be on the show this evening. So please welcome Jeremiah. He is a U.S. Navy veteran and also spent a number of years traveling to Afghanistan as a defense contractor. Jeremiah, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, Amanda. Good evening.
Hi, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for
I
having
want
me.
I want to get a little bit of background, which I'll go into here in a minute, but I would love to get just kind of as an initial reaction of watching what's unfolding. You and I talked about 24 hours ago, and yet so much has happened in 24 hours still over in Afghanistan. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of the floor to tell me kind of what your reaction is right now of what's going on, and we'll dig into that and a little bit more in a minute.
Amanda, my only reaction is wow. And,
Yeah, mine too.
It's every kind of facet of wow that you can think of. It's like, good wow, bad wow, like surprised, shocked, like it's crazy. I've talked to friends about it who were there as recently as 2 days ago, and others who were there, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and we're all just kind of scratching our head, and it's just, there's so much going on. It's all happening so fast. It's just really like, is this happening?
Yeah.
And it's hard to have an opinion because there's so much going on.
Yeah, and so much information that's coming from so many different directions. You and I talked about that you had served some time in Iraq while you were in the U.S. Navy. Most of your time in Afghanistan was post-military as a defense contractor, correct?
Yes, I was in the Navy when 9/11 happened. I was on an aircraft carrier. And once 9/11 happened, we were actually out to sea doing sea trials. We pulled back in a week later. They said, hey, guys, we're going home for a month and we're deploying to the Middle East. And we were off the coast of Pakistan. In 2001, that was my involvement in the United States when I was in the military active duty with Afghanistan in that war effort, and everything after that was as a defense contractor and a support role.
But in between that, you spent time in Iraq during that particular war in Iraq.
Yes. I was boots on ground in Iraq, embedded with a number of Marine Corps units.
Okay. And then as far as Afghanistan, do you even remember the number of times that you've been deployed over there as a defense contractor? I lost track.
No, maybe 8, 9,
Yeah.
possibly 10. I've got about 55 months total in Afghanistan.
Wow.
Since 2008. So, it's about 4.5 years there.
Wow.
And, some of my deployments I was gone for as long as 10 months, and others I was gone for as short as 3 months. So I mostly just kept track of the amount of time gone.
Sure.
So I believe it was 9 total.
Okay. And when I say defense contractor, you were working directly with the military. It's not like you were building roads and that kind of thing. You were working directly with the military, just outside of the
Yes.
military. Yeah.
Yes, we were always embedded with a U.S. military unit in some capacity, and we were either providing direct support to them, which we were initially providing a service to them. Then we were supporting them while they were providing the service, worked with multiple different units. And then as the mission changed later on, we actually went into a train, advise, and assist role where we were working with the Afghan army and training them to use this technology.
So you have a pretty much hands-on, real-life perspective on what was going on there, and like you said, wow, of what's happening now. I just want to have a really candid conversation. Like, do you feel like your time there was spent well? Is it confusing? Is it feel like a loss? What does it feel like?
It's, yeah, it's really hard to say right now because it's whatever answer I give, I know it's going to be emotion driven and confusion driven. I mean,
Sure.
it's
That's okay.
I feel great about what I did there, and when I was working there, I know the units I supported and I worked with, they were doing good things. Sometimes you question it, but I was going to share, if I, on one hand, I could look at it and say, wow, what did I do, right? And then on the other hand, I could say this was a good decision because it benefited me this way. So it's I could talk myself into any answer, I guess.
Sure, and that's why I love your honesty of like there's just a lot of confusion of like I don't know, and I think that that's probably pretty universal right now. With what I do for a living here in representing veterans before the VA, as you would imagine, so many of our clients here have served in Afghanistan. It's been an interesting last couple of days with people who are, frustrated, confused, just like you're talking about of, what.
Probably like a lot of WTF going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
For sure. And, we've talked around our office here. Most of our clients, or not our clients, but most of our employees here are either veterans themselves, some of them who'd served over there, family members of veterans. And, we even have a wife of a Vietnam veteran who works here. And I had a really interesting conversation with her today where, her husband, they've been married since they were in Vietnam. And, she got a little bit emotional even expressing to me today that it's her husband and her are having these kind of flashbacks to Saigon. He was on a boat that was leaving right after the fall of Saigon where people were crawling onto the ships, and seeing what's happening in Afghanistan with people grabbing onto the airplanes so it's not just, I think, affecting people who served in Afghanistan, it's affecting people who served in Vietnam even.
I can see that. I mean, I've seen a lot of the news comparisons the news clips making the comparison to Saigon. I'm not old enough to remember that, but I missed it by a couple of years. But it's definitely going to go down in history, and it's going to be so weird.
It's one thing to hear like the news stories about it. It's another thing to sit with somebody in my office who experienced it, who is making that comparison. This is certainly not about a headline. It's about, no, this feels weird. This feels weirdly familiar.
Yeah, which that's not a good feeling.
No, I think it's definitely we're experiencing something that is a moment in history for sure. If you're just joining us, this is Amanda with a Veteran's Voice. We are talking with Jeremiah, who is a U.S. Navy veteran. Also spent, would you say, almost 5 years of your time in Iraq since 2008?
About 4.5, yeah.
About 4.5 years. Supporting the Afghan military, supporting our U.S. military, and just kind of a flood of confusion, questioning, what are we doing? What happened? I certainly think that we would hope that somebody would, but it feels like nobody seemed to expect this to happen this fast.
That is crazy. I agree with you there. Just to see the dam broke, and it broke quick, for lack of a better term, because, and even to hear the officials saying that what they thought was going to take 6 to 9 months took 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that says a lot about what we didn't accomplish over there.
Well, and expand a little bit more on that, because that was going to be one of my questions. We've got about a minute and a half before we go to break, and we might have to revisit this when we come back. But, as much as you feel comfortable talking with, like, you worked directly with the Afghan military, how did you feel about, like, their capabilities, did they kind of take this on as a mission, or was it, oh, this is a job, I'm going to get paid? What was your experience with that?
There was yes to all of those. I mean, some of them were there for the job. Some of them were there because it was more opportunity than other ones in the military. Others were there for country pride. Some were even, or family pride. Others for like political gain. But they never seemed to like know, at least the small unit that we were working with. Mm-hmm. They never had a big picture understanding of how they fit into it and how it trickled down to them and what their contributions were. And I mean, one of the units that I worked with out of Kandahar, they were losing quality guys left and right to the Taliban. And just because the Taliban could pay them more, they had, hey, these guys are good mechanics. We'll pay them money to fix our motorcycles. And what happened to this guy? Oh, he quit the army. He's getting more money over here. And they were just running into a lot of problems.
Sure. That
made it difficult for themselves to be successful. And it sucks because as individuals, they wanted to learn, they wanted to grow, they wanted the accomplishment, but it was just the big organization, for lack of a better term, which I don't even know what to call it.
And even a different culture, for sure. When we come back, what I would love to talk about is to dig into a little bit more of that, of the kind of things that we did as, I don't know, maybe trying to impose an American values upon a country who maybe didn't share those values, and kind of what that looks like. We'll be right back. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I'm speaking with Jeremiah, U.S. Navy veteran, deployed to Afghanistan for many, many times. We'll be right back. Good evening. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC here in Los Angeles. I am a veteran advocate and attorney with the Veterans Law Group, and we are focusing tonight talking about all the happenings in Afghanistan. We are joined this evening by Jeremiah, who is a U.S. Navy veteran and also spent 4 to 5 years total between his multiple deployments over to Afghanistan as a defense contractor, working with the military and the Afghan military themselves. We're also taking your calls live this evening, so if you'd like to join us, if you've got a comment, a question, would just like to chime in about the subject matter. I know it's a heated conversation these days, especially the last couple of days, as it comes kind of a shock to all of us that work within this world of working with military and veterans, and I think even just civilians as well, of kind of what did we spend so much money and time over there, and what's going to happen. Doesn't have to be a political conversation. It doesn't have to be a, dig your heels in and say it's right that we left, or it's wrong that we left, or maybe it's just how we left. But I would love you to join us. You can contact us at 800-222-5222 if you'd like to join us for the conversation. And again, welcome back, Jeremiah. One of the things we were talking about before we went to break was, with working with the Afghan military or people who were supporting the military, is that sometimes they would lose people to go work for the Taliban because maybe the money was better. And so I was curious as to kind of your perspective of, I think we somewhat take for granted as Americans, we have this inherent thing as we grow up of American values and of doing stuff for country. And in other countries, it's not so much like that, because it's who do you trust? Who do you don't trust? Is the government going to change tomorrow, which it seems to have been the last couple of days. So can you speak to any of that as to your experience with working with them?
Yes, all of it was definitely a factor. every single day. I mean, you're dealing. It's an old culture, an old society, and I found when I was working with the Afghans, and we were embedded with them. We lived on an American base, which was a small annex. We were picked up every day by the Marine Corps. We got in our vehicle. We drove over to the Afghan base. We went through a full 12-hour workday with them, and so we got to see everything. We experienced it. We saw them work together, eat together, have meetings, interact. And it's just, we knew that you couldn't put this guy on the same shift as this guy because they just didn't get along because they were from different regions or they looked different. And it was so interesting to see, two people would walk into a room or somebody would walk into a room and not know the person who was there, but already have a disgust for them just because of the way they looked or their headdress that they had on or the vest they were wearing. And it was like, what's going on here? And we always had a linguist, an interpreter with us who would also give us the cultural background and say, this is what's going on. This is, a several 100-year-old feud. And just these guys are never going to like each other because of it. It is tribal. And that's exactly what
tribal.
It is, tribal.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's tribal. Some of it goes a little bit beyond the tribal, and it gets a little bit more into like you further their country of origin. They're not from Afghanistan. Well, where are they from? And it might not be a country they like. They might look at them differently because of it. And it's like they've been here for 80 years, 100 years, and they have a different mentality towards women as well over there, and also just different work ethic. One of the things that I found so interesting is when I was working directly with the Afghan military, I worked with them for 2.5 years at a couple different locations. And, they all said, we as young Afghan men don't know anything but American support. This one guy said, he's like, I'm an officer in the Afghan army. I'm 22 years old. He's like, as long as I can remember, you guys have been here.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, well, you're the money for us. You're the source. We're like, oh, okay. And there was always the question of what are we going to do when you leave? But it was like, I don't know. That day will never come.
Well, that's the interesting thing about it is that when you look back on, like, we still have a base in Germany, we still have a base in Korea, we still have a base in Japan, it's like those places in which we've helped kind of rebuild. The question is, yes, we don't necessarily have to be in an endless war in Afghanistan, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a presence there. We're not still in war with Germany, but we still have a base there. We have a base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba,
For strategic reasons, right? You think that would be the most strategic location to have a base.
Right. And for a way of creating, even just the security forces to help support the Afghan, because I feel like, and I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about all this too. So I'm speaking openly, and this is like a thinking out loud kind of thing, although it's being recorded and it'll probably be used against me at some point. But I look at it as like, providing security forces there or support to the Afghan military helped them have a certain sense of like backing, like solid backing. And once we said that we're out, and we said we're out in a month from now, it's as soon as there was pressure back from the Taliban onto the Afghan military, it just collapsed because we weren't there to support them. And maybe it's certainly isn't necessarily just about us, but wouldn't that have provided them some sort of additional like strength to say, well, we have the Americans behind us? That still matters in the world, doesn't it? It
should. I hope it does. You'd think so. I mean, we may not have as many of them behind us, but we've got 1 or 2 or 5, and they got big guns, and that means something, right?
It should. Definitely it should. If you're just tuning in, this is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice, and we're talking with Jeremiah, who is a U.S. Navy veteran and spent quite a bit of time in Afghanistan. We're just talking in general, just as, human to human, American to American, of like all of this stuff is happening after us investing 20 years of Americans' lives, time, money into that industry, or into that country, and then watching it just kind of dissolve and disappear. One of the things that's been really interesting, you brought up a few minutes ago about the women in Afghanistan. And I, as a woman, am just so concerned about what's going on. I know that, the headlines out today are that the Taliban is promising to protect women's rights, which I find very interesting, that a day and a half into them taking over, they're doing press conferences. I don't know if you find that interesting, but it seems so sophisticated in this crazy world of people grabbing onto airplanes to try to get away.
They're very progressive people. They've come a long way in the past 20 years.
Clearly, but I see that they're saying things like, that they're promising to protect women's rights as long as it's within the laws and rules of Sharia law, which doesn't really protect women's rights at all. So you're getting these strange, they've definitely become more sophisticated in the sense of working the media. That's for sure.
Definitely. Propaganda is a tool they use. It's, I don't think it's just them culturally, and by them, I mean the Taliban. It's culturally that women have been oppressed for years over there. Mm-hmm. And I know that was one of the big issues facing the U.S. military, and we were trying to help them rebuild, is there were a lot of females that went to the military academies, that also went to universities and came into the military, but they had no jobs for them, right? No.
So these are Afghan women that are going in and then not getting a result out of it. Is that what you're meaning?
Yes, they're getting a commission, they're getting their training, but then they just sit there stagnant in Kabul at the base because there's no unit to send them out to, because they can't send a female out there in an authoritarian role, because the way the culture is set up, they won't respect her or her authority.
Right.
And I had multiple linguists tell me that, and they would always tell me, they're like, just culturally, we live with our moms, we live with our families, and our moms take care of us. And if it gets and we would ask them, like, what if your mother passed away? What if you didn't have a mom? They're like, then our sisters take care of us. Like, it was just so matter of fact. And I was working with a British general when I was in Kandahar, and he came down and he paid us a visit, because we actually had a schoolhouse set up there where we were training the Afghans, and then we would send them out to individual squadrons to perform. And we were discussing setting up, first trying to integrate females into the Afghan squadrons, and that was the problem he was having. He said, himself, that because of the cultural differences, they just couldn't get them to work side by side together. They were looking at, the possibility of setting up an all-female unit. And, this is back in 2017 timeframe, and I don't know if it ever happened. It was, just two guys talking.
Sure.
But you see it all over the place there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, while they're widely talking about how they're going to implement Sharia law, which very much restricts women's rights, they're today in a press conference saying, and I'm looking at the quote, "Women will be afforded all their rights because women are a key part of our society. We are guaranteeing all their rights within the limits of Islam." And so they're qualifying that. We're saying, yes, we will do that, but within the limits of what we believe is our, and they have a very interesting, tight version of Islam when they go to Sharia law, for sure. It's not necessarily the same thing that a lot of other people believe in that. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've seen the VA responding to in this, to talk to veterans and support veterans, or what their response is to veterans who served in Afghanistan and are trying to figure out kind of, okay, why were we there? What are we doing? We got your response, but there's a lot more that's going on even here in our own office. So we'll be right back after the break here on KABC 790. This is the Veterans Voice with Amanda Manier. Good evening. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC. I am a veteran advocate and attorney at the Veterans Law Group. The Veterans Law Group has been focused on exclusively representing veterans pursuing their disability compensation for about 25 years. This show is all about highlighting and celebrating veterans and their families, those organizations that are helping veterans, talking about the news affecting veterans, and then answering questions about how you can get support. With all that's been going on the last few days in Afghanistan and how that's impacting not only those of us who help support veterans themselves, their families. We spent about 20 years focusing time, money, treasure, lives in Afghanistan to see what's happening the last couple of days is, for me as a civilian, even just working with veterans every day is heart-wrenching and heartbreaking, but I'm not even going to pretend to understand what that means to veterans. And I think that it's all across the board. And, some of it is sadness, some of it is frustration, some of it is, well, that's part of this story of being in the military. But what I wanted to do today is to bring in one of our guests that you've heard before, but he is a friend of mine and somebody who served as a U.S. Navy veteran, but also has spent quite a bit of his time, even post-military, in Afghanistan, working directly with our military and then also the Afghan military there to try to help kind of secure and train and help establish some stability over there that now seems to have collapsed. So I'm welcoming back Jeremiah. I feel like I just introduced you with a very sad introduction, to be honest.
You do sound kind of sad right now, but it's great to be here.
Well,
let's be happy together.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I'm happy to be Americans for sure. But yeah. I think those of us as Americans, it's part of our, we don't just focus on our own little bubble. We've always, as Americans, been part of how can we help the world? And that's what we've always done. And so when it all seems to kind of collapse, it's like, well, crap, what was that about?
So true. I just want to throw something out or two. I picked it up when I was in Afghanistan, and it's one of the first things I learned there. The first thing was thank you, and the second one was life is good, and it's Zindagi Hubas. And that's exactly what it means. Zindagi Hubas, life is good. And even when it's not, you've got to find the good in it. So you said it sounded sad, but it's sad right now. It's crazy, Amanda, and a minute from now, we'll have a whole other emotion going on. But we got to look big picture, take a step back. And, well, it sucks. And there's some crazy things going on right now, and who knows how to react to them. And life is good in the big picture, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially those of us who see that this way. And I would even say that as much as we want to probably feel our hearts heavy for those living in Afghanistan right now, I'm a believer in God, and I believe that things are always going to be better at some point in time. And so we can't just assume that because they're going through the craziness they're going in, that everybody is in a complete chaos. Many of them may be in a perspective just like us of, yeah, well, it's going to get better. It will, hard to believe, but that's some faith for sure.
It definitely is. I mean, just knowing the Afghan people, having worked with them for the brief period of time that I did in their long history, I mean, they've been around for a long time. A lot of people have come and gone through their borders, tried to conquer them, tried to change their ways, and they're still there doing their thing. And I think eventually that's what's going to save them, is they, as a people, need to figure out what their thing is.
Yeah.
And once they do that, they need to figure out how to start working towards it.
Yeah, to make a better life for themselves, for sure. One of the interesting things that, and I'll start this conversation with a little hesitancy, but I'm going to start it anyway. So I'm looking at an email, which you probably got because the email came from the VA. It got blasted all across the internet yesterday in the evening. We got it as representatives. You probably got it as a veteran who's part of the email list from the VA. And the subject matter of it was Afghanistan, let's talk about it. Did you get that email?
I got it 3 times. I got it from the VA. I got it from the Northern California VA, and I believe it was from the VA of California.
Okay.
But I got it, 3 separate times. I was like, wow, okay. And, so we're talking about it.
So I'm sorry about the dog that's barking here. We have a service dog in my office, and she's barking at the cleaners here. So what I want to do is read a little bit about this. This is interesting, and I'm going to curb my we all know, if you've heard the show at all, I have a certain cynicism about the VA, but I also do believe and understand that they do great work. But what I will respect about this email is they were on top of it and trying to reach out and say, hey, if you're struggling with what's going on, we're here to help. But I want to read a little bit of this. The subject matter of it is Afghanistan, let's talk about it. And then it starts off with, and again, this is from the VA to veterans all across the country. Veterans from all eras are reacting to the events in Afghanistan, such as the U.S. withdrawal and takeover by the Taliban. One of the first things I'll say about that is, initially, yes, I thought just people who served in Afghanistan, but having a conversation today in my office with the wife of a Vietnam veteran, it's certainly bringing back memories of Saigon to them, not just in the headlines of the news, but personally to them. It says, you are not alone. Veterans may question the meaning of their service or whether it was worth the sacrifices they made. They may feel more moral distress about experiences that they had during their service. It is normal to feel this way. Talk with your friends and family, reach out to battle buddies, connect with peer-to-peer networks, or sign up for mental health services. And it goes into resources available, veterans crisis lines, vet centers, all kinds of organizations that are helping people right now. And then goes into some recent reactions or common reactions that you may feel, or your veteran who you know may feel during this time: frustrated, angry, increase in mental health symptoms of PTSD, sleeping poorly, being more overly productive, trying to be reoccupied with danger, stuff like that. I bring this up for a couple things with you, Jeremiah, is that, one, I appreciate the fact that the VA is being proactive about it. It's interesting to hear news stories talking about, okay, how many casualties have we had in 20 years in Afghanistan? It's about 2,500. How in deaths, which they focus on that. 20,000 plus more people who have been, identified in the statistics of being injured. But so many more of the people that I work with, it's the people who have struggled with, okay, I didn't die, and I've not been maybe physically injured or have broken bone or an IED, but the mental health that has been caused by the multiple times that we've spent over there. And then I think what this, email is getting at is triggering some of that of like, well, okay, yeah, I may not be able to support my family anymore, or I can't connect with my family anymore, or I can't, continue to do the things that I used to do. Those are the quote unquote casualties that I feel like are not even identified, that I see every day. I don't know if you have a perspective on that.
I do. And I don't know if it's exactly in line with yours, but
it doesn't have to be.
Or with what you're asking, but a lot of and I say kids because they're kids. I mean, I had the Marine Corps providing security for me for a large amount of the time I was there. And I mean, they were college students, reservists, 19 to 22 years old. Mm-hmm. And so they are kids, but a lot of them are over there and they don't know what they're doing, what their rights are, what's available to them, like the normal day-to-day grind, the effect that it's having on them. I mean, I went and sat in a tactical operations center every day, and that's where the battlefield is being fought, where the war is being engaged. And this guy who's providing security for me, technically he's not in the fight, but he is watching a big screen and seeing people getting blown up day in and day out. Mm-hmm. Right? And it affects them, but they don't understand it. Right? And, one time this guy said, he's like, I don't want to go there anymore. I'm tired of seeing people get blown up. Right? And they just, you're an infantry Marine, suck it up.
Right.
There's guys with much worse jobs right now than you, and it's so interesting, like, to hear that, and you tell them, like, hey, you need to talk to somebody about that. You need to go talk to the docs, right? Let them know, hey, this is, And even if it's not messing with your head, it just makes you feel a little different or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think the VA's email. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, we're just coming up against a hard break, and so I wanna give you a little bit more time to expand on that when we come back and dig into that a little bit deeper when we get back. We're going up against a break. We're going up against a break, Jeremiah. Let's come back when we get back. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC. Good evening. Welcome back. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC in Los Angeles. I am a veteran advocate and attorney with the Veterans Law Group, and we help veterans who are pursuing their VA disability benefits. That's what we do full time. But this show is all about highlighting veterans and helping to just kind of focus on what's going on in the world of veterans and helping them have a voice. Tonight's episode, we've been focusing primarily on all of the stuff that's going on in Afghanistan. And while I could very much step on the soapbox and talk about my perspective as a civilian, but also a civilian who works with veterans every day, not only as part of my team here, but also people who, as clients, it's been a flurry over the last couple of days of people feeling like, those who served in Afghanistan are like, why am I doing this? And why did I do this? And I think they call our office because we're the representative as attorneys, and we're a place that they know that we'll pick up the phone and we'll listen to them and talk to them. But it's been a wide spectrum, I would say, of emotions. It certainly isn't all just anger, upset, whatever. I think there's some confusion, and also some people who've just contacted us that just are like, okay, I want to talk to somebody else who understands what I'm talking about. So I have a dear friend Jeremiah, who is a U.S. Navy veteran and who spent quite a bit of time in his post-military career working in Afghanistan, not only with the local military police, but also with our embedded troops. So I asked him to join me this evening to kind of just give his perspective on having spent 4.5, nearly 5 years of his life in the last, since 2008, in Afghanistan, and knows kind of firsthand what's going on there. Jeremiah, one of the things that you and I talked about is you had what you called a linguist. I guess that's an interpreter who is now stateside?
Yeah, that's my Tajiman.
Tajiman, is that the name of the interpreter, or
that is the Afghan word for interpreter? Yes.
Oh, I love that. Well, grateful that he's already stateside, but probably somebody who you have a certain amount of respect and affection for, because you spent many times with him, assuming that he's going to say the right things that you said to the other people. So there has to be a certain trust between you and him.
Context is huge. And so there is. And there was several times when, after the conversation, he's like, I didn't say this and this because we don't say that here. And I was like, oh, okay. And, it's just cultural differences that you and I aren't aware of.
Sure. Can you think of one that you could give us an example, just to think about?
Now that you put me on the spot, no.
That's all right.
I can tell one specific time we were having a conversation about tactics and basically forward planning and crew resource management and how to utilize personnel. Okay. And it basically, if you know that this is what you have to do 6 weeks from now, you have to look at what you have available now, plan your resources so you can get a little bit of training, proper rest cycle, and still have what you need to support your exercises that you have going on. And it turned into, and I was like, wow, that was unproductive. And we walked away, and they're like, the only way I could have expressed it would have been you challenged their authority in front of the entire unit. They're like, so interesting. I was like, hey, very well. Right.
So that was more of like a cultural thing of they were protecting you from or allowing respect from the people who were hearing from you, because they wouldn't have spoken that way to each other.
Exactly. Just, yes, situational awareness. Even though I'm coming in there, I'm helping, and this is my role, and those are the things I'm supposed to say because I'm trying to help them achieve this goal. It's sometimes the way we say things
Mm.
might look at it as it's my goal and not their goal, if
Sure.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it happened a lot. And my daughter cusses in Dari.
Right.
It's people think it's funny. She knows the bad words. She knows the funny words. We have commands for our dog. It's those are the little things that my Tajiman, that they tell you, because you're not always working. You're sitting around. There's time for BS and hanging out.
Right. We're all still human people.
Yeah,
with
it's
humanity
it's like-
interactions. Yeah.
I mean, one of my interpreters, one who's actually here in California, he was a professor at the University of Kabul of geology, and I was just like, what? All right,
Wow.
what are you doing here with me? Right? And he was trying to get to America. It was one of those, hey, I come support the U.S. forces, I can get to America.
And he
I
got
was
here.
like, and he got here. He's here in California, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And his kids will all probably be doctors. And because he realizes the opportunity he has being here in this country, and that's I don't think he'll waste it.
Well, and as much as, we've heard in politics over the last couple of years about how, America has all of these faults, it certainly has its faults, but it's still the open opportunity for people all across the country or all across the world. And I would imagine, not to completely bring up a terrible subject, but I'm sure that you still know people that are in Afghanistan who are there and haven't gotten out.
Yes, I do. And some I was talking to a friend of mine today. I was like, I'm concerned about some of these people. I mean, it's, I worked embedded with the Afghan National Army with certain units, and there was really no opportunity for them in Afghanistan, and it's other than doing what they did, and it's kind of like, what are these guys going to do? All right, it's and you see that these reports. It depends on which channel you watch the news on, but some will say that things are going peacefully and we're getting everybody out of there, and another one will say, hey, they're going door to door killing people.
Yeah.
And if they are, these are the people that I worry about.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you a bit of a hard question we've never talked about before. Do you believe that do you believe that the Afghan people have a sense of hope for a better life, or hope, or do they? I think that's something that's inherent within an American value of we can always make things better, we can change things. But I think somewhat we take that for granted, and we think that that's how other people in other countries feel. They had a opportunity for hope in the last 20 years, but do they really? Is it really hope, or did they really? I mean, because I look at it as if they had hope, it just got crushed.
Yeah, I was going to say if they had hope, it turned into dread. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I was, in defense, and I stepped away in 2014 for a couple of years, and I went back overseas a couple of years later, and there was definitely a shift. And it was more so not just, hey, what's Afghanistan going to do, but it's what are we going to do when you guys leave? It seemed like that the shift had gone that way, and it kind of went back to what I was saying. It was the younger generation was just so used to us being there and providing the narrative for them, and we changed their government, put a new one in place, put new elected officials in place. Some people agreed with it, some didn't.
Sure.
Some saw the corruption that was going on and said it's just the old ways but in a new suit. And so it's hard to say.
Right. But it's something I think to reflect on as people who are born and raised here in America who don't necessarily have the perspective like your linguist of he was going to do what it took, leaving the university, becoming an interpreter for you to be able to come to America. That's a sense of purpose and hope and taking care of your family that I think sometimes we as Americans don't even have that anymore. We somewhat take it for granted that, if I finish high school and go to college and are going to, turn into a career, that means that I'm entitled to all the things that America has to offer. And almost like we don't have to work for it anymore. And there's there's people who come to this country, who flood into this country, not just from a perspective of, running against, there's certainly the asylum and all of that kind of thing, but it sounds like the linguist is there of like, I know how to get out of this place that I'm going to, and I'm an educated professor, and I'm going to do this to get there. Not everybody has that opportunity, but at the same time, I think sometimes we live in this bubble in America as we're infighting between progressives and liberals and what the Biden administration did and what the Trump administration did and all that kind of thing. And we somewhat lose the, identity of us as Americans to give hope to the world. And you were just talking about what sounds like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but us being there in Afghanistan gave hope to them. And they got worried when we were leaving.
Yes.
Is that fair?
No, it definitely is fair. And I don't know if we want to chalk that up to us being there for too long. I don't want to call it a lack of stability, but I mean, it's every single year we basically had, for lack of a better term, a regime change in the American military and the mission over there.
Yeah.
Whether it was NATO running it or U.S. forces running it. And, if it is NATO, it's every year it's a different country.
And I hate to interrupt you, but we're running against a hard break. Thank you so much, Jeremiah, for your perspective on all of this. And I am grateful for your service and all that you've done for this. Thank you again. This is Amanda with the Veterans Law Group on the Veterans Voice with 790 KABC, Los Angeles.